Sterling Net Point Power Rankings, NFL Week 10, and the Bias Plus reports for NFL Week 11 of the 2024-25 season. So I have highlighted the top 8, Benny, because that's the top quarter of the league, and generally, that's where I'm looking for my winners from. Let's again give some love to the number 1 ranked teams in each of the categories. We'll start off with average net points, A&P. That would be Detroit at plus 12.6. In scoring, the average points for number 1 would be the Baltimore Ravens at 31.8. Defensively, the LA Chargers, number 1, only allowing 13.1 points per game. And number 1 in average turnover differential, ATOD, are those Buffalo Bills, averaging plus 1.3 turnover differential per game. So congratulations to all the number 1s. I know everybody likes to look at the top 5. I like to do the top 8, but just to run down here, and net points, you're going from Buffalo at 9.7 to Philly at 8. That's about the highest Philly's been. And I think, we know that beat down of the Cowboys helped move them up.
Definitely.
Pittsburgh, 7.7. The Chargers, 7.6. Washington, 7.3. Minnesota, 7.1. And Baltimore at 6.5. Now, you notice I have Baltimore in red. One of the reasons I have Baltimore in red, there they are, number 1 place in scoring. However, if you look along the top half of the rest of this, of those stats, you'll see them in the turnover differential at plus 0.4. And that's about it. So that's where part of the challenge is. In scoring, you have Baltimore and Detroit. I made note, Ben, I just thought it was so interesting. Baltimore is scoring 31.8 points per game. Detroit is scoring 31.6 points per game. Could the quarterbacks be any different?
Oh, yeah. You got your classic pocket passer and your ultimate dual threat.
You know what I'm saying? And they're only 0.2 points per game separate in terms of their scoring productivity. I just thought that was very interesting when I thought about it. Wow. Speaking of dual threats, Buffalo coming in at 29, tied another dual threat, Washington Commanders at 29 points per game. Tampa Bay, another team in red at 27.9, Cincinnati 27, San Fran at 25, tied with Philadelphia at 25.9 points per game for the top 8 spots. In scoring, Chargers, again, we said number 1, right behind them, Pittsburgh, behind them, Minnesota, behind them, Denver. They go for 13 points per game to 16 and 17.4, 17.7. Kansas City, right there, 5th place, tied with Philadelphia. Philadelphia's tied with some interesting teams here at 17.9 points per game. And Chicago at 18.6 points per game. Detroit, 19 points per game, filling in the 8th spot. And your top 8 spots in turnover differential, Buffalo and 1. Chargers and Pittsburgh tied for 2nd and 3rd at plus 1. Detroit and Chicago tied for 4th and 5th at 0.9. Houston, Green Bay tied for 6th and 7th. Excuse me, at 0.7, and Washington coming in 8th at 0.6. So those are your top 8, Benny. You see the rest of the numbers here, and I invite people to come to the Sterling Net Point Power Rankings, find out where your team lies. Anything to say about the top half before I just take a quick look at the bottom half?
Well, I think I mentioned last week that we're starting to see some separation here between the real contenders and the real pretenders. And the picture's just getting a little bit clearer week by week. I will say this. I'm not exactly sure where the LA Chargers were in average net points last week, but they are making a statement. They are making a big statement being in the top 8 here. Everybody else in this top 8, I would think that most people would not be real surprised about. but the Chargers are cruising along here very nicely. Mostly, I have no problem with Justin Herbert. I have no problem with their offense. These guys know who they are, and they play like who they are. But that defense, who I actually had some not so nice words for early in the season after the first two wins over a couple of weak teams. I didn't think that they were for real, but these guys are for real. They keep teams off the scoreboard. If they don't do nothing else, they don't win every game, but they keep teams off the scoreboard, and that has vaulted them into the number 5 spot in average net points. And I'm looking at them. I'm going to keep an eye on. Put it that way.
Well, let's look at them. We're going to keep an eye on them too, because they're going to pop up in red in the bottom half here. Well, I didn't put the LA Chargers in red. I should have. 20.7 points per game is what they're scoring. And that's where their challenge is. So they're tops in defense, something left to be desired in terms of scoring. I mentioned Denver, 19.7 points per game scoring, and Chicago, 19.4 points per game scoring. And again, these are teams where when you go to their defense, they're in the top 8, top 25 of the league. And here, scoring, they're in the bottom half, almost to the bottom 25 if I'm counting correctly. Baltimore and Tampa Bay, I want to particularly point out defensively, Baltimore give it up 25.3 points per game. Tampa Bay give it up 26.6 points per game for 28th place defensively for defensive scoring. So, you know, I jumped on that Baltimore bandwagon, all excited about Lamar and King Henry. But again, 3 teams on the football team, offense, defense, and special teams. And this defense leaves a little something to be desired. But hey, you know, maybe they got the offense that can overcome all of those issues. So before we wrap up the Sterling Net Point Power Rankings, Benny, you have any further questions?
Just in the defense of those two teams, Baltimore and Tampa Bay, yeah, average points against, they're pretty low. But along with keeping teams off the scoreboard, it's important that you keep the ball in your offense's hands. And both of these teams are in the top half in turnover differential. So that's something that can't be forgotten.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That really helps. That helps get the ball back to your offense, and here they go again. Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay. All right, so that wraps it up for the Sterling Net Point Power Rankings, which you can find at www.sterlingnppr.com.